Springdale was the perfect, quiet American town. Nestled in the rolling hills, it was a place where crime was almost non-existent, and everyone knew each other. Families thrived, businesses prospered, and strangers were greeted with friendly smiles. James Weston was considered the embodiment of success and decency in this town. He had built a real estate empire, employing dozens of local residents, and had a reputation for always lending a hand when needed. He donated to charities, coached his son's Little League team, and attended town council meetings regularly. To everyone in Springdale, James was untouchable, a role model for how to balance career, family, and community service. But no one could have predicted the darkness hiding beneath his carefully crafted exterior. Rebecca Moore was a vibrant, 25-year-old woman who had moved to Springdale for a fresh start. Having recently completed her degree in business, she had landed a job as James Weston's assistant at his real estate company. Rebecca was quickly becoming a key figure in the business, and her future seemed bright. But on a Friday evening, she vanished without a trace. Rebecca had left the office late, telling her colleagues she was heading home to relax after a long week, but she never arrived. Her friends reported her missing the next day when she didn't show up for brunch, and her apartment remained untouched. Her phone was turned off, and no one could reach her. The town was shaken. Springdale wasn't the kind of place where people went missing. Within days, search parties were organized, and James himself made an emotional public statement, urging anyone with information to come forward. The police launched an investigation, but weeks passed with no new leads. Detective Sarah Johnson, the town's lead investigator, found herself increasingly frustrated. Sarah wasn't from Springdale. She had spent years in the city, solving homicides and dealing with some of the worst criminals. She had come to this quiet town for a fresh start, just like Rebecca. But now it seemed darkness had followed her here. Sarah initially had no reason to suspect James. He was cooperative, deeply involved in the search for Rebecca, and maintained a clean public image. But as she dug deeper into Rebecca's life, inconsistencies began to emerge. There were subtle things, comments from Rebecca's co-workers, rumors that she had felt uncomfortable around James in recent weeks. There were also unexplained gaps in James's schedule the day Rebecca disappeared. Something didn't add up. As Sarah began to investigate James's life more thoroughly, she discovered small details that painted a more complex picture. For example, she learned that James had been involved in several contentious real estate deals, some of which had mysteriously fallen apart. Former business partners spoke of his manipulative nature, though no one had ever been willing to go on record with complaints. Emily, James's wife, was another layer of the mystery. On the surface, Emily appeared to be the perfect suburban housewife, always present at her children's school events and charity functions. But people whispered that she was distant, disconnected from the life James presented to the public. Sarah arranged a visit to their home, under the guise of routine questioning. When Sarah spoke with Emily, it became clear that something was wrong. Emily's hands trembled as she answered basic questions about James's whereabouts on the night of Rebecca's disappearance. She stammered, struggling to maintain eye contact. But she never said anything outright. Her fear was palpable. After the meeting, Sarah began to see a different narrative forming. Maybe Emily wasn't just the loyal wife. Maybe she knew something, or worse, was being manipulated or controlled by James. It wasn't long before Sarah uncovered more troubling details. Through old records, Sarah found that James had been connected to a similar case years earlier, in a nearby town. A young woman named Laura Higgins, who had worked for James in his early real estate days, had also disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The case had never been solved, and eventually it was forgotten. This revelation opened up a new path in the investigation. Could Rebecca's disappearance be connected to Laura's? Could James have been involved in both? Then came a breakthrough. One evening, Sarah received a call from Alex Green, a former college friend of James's who had been watching the news about Rebecca's disappearance. He claimed to have information about James that might be relevant. When Sarah met with Alex, he revealed that back in their college days, James had exhibited troubling behavior toward women, obsessive, controlling behavior. Alex even recalled one incident where a woman had accused James of stalking her. but the situation had been swept under the rug. Alex had distanced himself from James after college, but had always felt uneasy about the things he had witnessed. Now, seeing the news, Alex couldn't stay silent any longer. This testimony added another layer to Sarah's investigation. James wasn't just an upstanding businessman with a few suspicious real estate deals. He was someone with a deeply troubling past. The investigation took a critical turn when Sarah received a tip about an old warehouse on the outskirts of Springdale. The property had been owned by James's firm but had been abandoned for years. No one thought much of it. After all, it was just another failed real estate venture. But Sarah had a hunch. When she and her team arrived at the warehouse, they found something chilling. Hidden in the back of the building was a secret room, carefully concealed behind a false wall. Inside the room were old photographs, journals, and disturbing items, souvenirs from previous victims. Among them was a folder filled with notes about Rebecca's daily routines, her habits, and even personal details only someone close to her would know. This was the evidence Sarah had been searching for. James had been stalking Rebecca, just as he had done with other women before her. The discovery linked him not only to Rebecca's disappearance but also to several other cold cases from neighboring towns. But Sarah knew she needed more to make the arrest stick. She couldn't rely on circumstantial evidence alone. She needed to catch James in the act. Sarah had anticipated that James might try to cover his tracks. And she was right. One night, under the cover of darkness, James drove to the warehouse, intending to destroy the evidence Sarah had found. But what he didn't know was that Sarah had set up surveillance, expecting him to return. When James arrived at the warehouse, Sarah and her team were waiting for him. As soon as he stepped inside, they moved in, catching him red-handed with the box of incriminating evidence. James was arrested on the spot, and the town was rocked by the news. At the station, under intense interrogation, James finally cracked. He confessed, but his confession was far more chilling than anyone could have expected. James admitted that Rebecca wasn't his first victim. Over the years, he had stalked and killed several women, carefully planning each disappearance so that no one would ever suspect him. He spoke of his crimes with a disturbing detachment, as if recounting mundane tasks. Each woman, he claimed, had been chosen for a reason, whether they were vulnerable, alone, or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Rebecca had been his latest obsession, but her disappearance had spiraled out of his control when the town became too invested in finding her. In the aftermath of James's arrest, Emily Weston came forward with her own revelation. For years, she had suspected that James was hiding something dark, but she had never imagined the extent of his crimes. Emily revealed that she had found disturbing notes in James's study years earlier, notes similar to the ones Sarah had discovered at the warehouse. But out of fear for her own safety and the safety of their children, Emily had kept silent. Now, with James behind bars, Emily was ready to tell the truth. She handed over letters, photos, and other documents that further implicated James in the disappearances of multiple women. Emily, it seemed, had been another victim of James's manipulation, forced to live in fear and secrecy. James Weston was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Springdale would never be the same. The town, once a beacon of safety and community, had been shattered by the revelation that one of its most trusted citizens had been a cold-blooded killer. As Sarah watched James through the bars of his cell, she couldn't help but wonder how many more people like him were out there, hiding behind masks of normalcy, and how many more victims might still be waiting to be found.